not only what that means in the narrow Soto Zen context, but what it means in just the broader Buddhist context. And there's pretty much form in everything that we do. Even the practice of Zazen itself is a form. We take the physical posture of Zazen, we bow before we sit, we turn and we bow away from where we sit, we bow when the bell rings to do kinhin, we do kinhin in shashu, we follow a particular pattern with our walking and breathing. And so even just Zazen in and of itself is ritual. And ritual even existed in the days of Shakyamuni Buddha. So the rituals that would take place around requesting the Dharma, one would bare their shoulder and circle the Buddha 3 times, kneel in gasho, and ask to receive the Dharma. This is a type of ritual that's done. There's a ritual in giving the Dharma. There's mudras that are used to express teachings. There's rituals in the way that we recite Dharma, and there's a ritual to transmitting Dharma. So all of these things are rituals, and each sect of Buddhism has its own rituals. And these are used to direct our efforts in the direction of awakening, and it's used to raise the bodhicitta, the mind of awakening, and it's used to understand that what we're pointing ourselves towards is no other than pointing ourselves at ourself. So there's a lot of different reasons why people are uncomfortable around ritual, depending on, where they're from. And it seems that a lot of times people think that ritual is something that's superfluous to Buddhist teaching, that we can just do meditation or zazen or something like that, and that all of this other stuff is just kind of flowers or filler. But like I talked about, since the time of Shakyamuni Buddha, there have been rituals around the Dharma. So it's not something that's excessive or unnecessary. And oftentimes when people tell me they don't like ritual, or when I don't like a particular type of ritual or something like that, I realize that what I'm saying is I don't like what I don't like, and I like what I do like. So, oftentimes people enjoy oryoki. They think it's a very beautiful way of eating or something like that. But then when it comes to prostrating 3 times, doing sampai before the altar and reciting sutras, there's some hesitance around that sometimes. And I think part of that also comes from that's just the way that our karmic human being nature is. We like things we don't like. We aim ourselves towards the things we do like, and then we begrudgingly do the things that we don't like. And so I look at ritual as a way of practicing the Dharma through our karmic truths, which is my body, speech, and mind are that of conditionally born things. So there's going to be likes and dislikes. And I'm using this karmic body and background to enact these practices towards awakening. And that's going to be difficult because karma is deeply rooted. And so if we want to be the Buddha nature that we are, then we need to take the posture of a Buddha. We need to use the speech of a Buddha, the sutras, mantras, teachings, and we need to have the mind of a Buddha, which is directing our minds towards awakening. So we convert the karma of body, speech, and mind of greed, hate, and ignorance into awakening, into compassion, into charity, into effort, into precepts, and into wisdom. So we use these 6 paramitas to turn the conditioned self towards the unconditioned self. And that's a ritual in and of itself. And some rituals are recognized by one sect and not by another. But the problem isn't the ritual, because that ritual is an expression of that type of medicine for that type of illness. So in the Lotus Sutra, the Buddha talks about two vehicles: Theravada, the tradition of the elders, which in that sutra is called Hinayana, which is somewhat of a pejorative, and talks about the Mahayana being the great vehicle. So these two practices were very different. The Theravada practice was the practice of precepts, renunciation. The practice of Mahayana is the idea that everybody is capable of awakening, and you can awaken from whatever circumstances you're in currently in this very life. And these two vehicles, they were, seemingly opposed to one another. And then the Buddha introduced the Ekayana, which is the one vehicle. So the one vehicle contains all of these other vehicles, these two other vehicles in them, all of its Buddha practice. And then the Buddha goes on to talk about the Buddhayana, which is the Buddha vehicle. So that's to say, all of these vehicles, let's just say cars, these three cars are all going to the same place, pointing towards our own awakening, our own innate nature that is empty and unconditioned. Now, this car will take you there a specific way. The middle car will take you there a specific way. The third car is not dependent on these two cars. They're all going to the same place, is what the Buddha is teaching. They're all going to the same place. So for those that are attracted to this car, these rituals, these practices will take you there. For those that are attracted to this car, these rituals, these practices will take you there. But actually, those two cars, we can consider them driving up onto a boat, and that boat's going to take you across the water. So the vehicle doesn't matter. For different people, Shakyamuni Buddha emphasized different teachings, all the Dharma, but use different aspects of the teachings called upaya, or hoden, I believe. And it means skillful means. So for a farmer, the Buddha would use farming as a way to reach that person. For a merchant, commerce would be the way to talk about it. And from each person's individual background, there would be a way to talk about it. There'd be a way to reach that person. Rituals are a way to do that. For some, having something like a mala or juzu is a way of holding on to something, holding on to the Dharma, these 108 onno, these 108 delusions. We can pulverize them, run them up. For others, just hands in gasho, reciting namuke. So all these things are rituals that point us in that direction. And when we point ourselves in the ritual, we can let go of our conditioned self and really practice what is just right in front of us and what's taking place. And whether that's offering incense, making prostrations, whatever the ritual is, it's always pointing here. It's pointing to ourselves, our unconditioned, non-karmic conditioned state. And Dharma transmission is a ritual. That's something that takes place between the teacher and the disciple. And that practice is both recognizing the Buddha mind of awakening as what they're raising up together. And it's recognizing what's been passed from one teacher to the student who is now a teacher. And it doesn't matter who recognizes this ritual, because this ritual takes place between the teacher and the student. Now, that's in the absolute sense. In the relative sense, there's, certain requirements and things that need to be done, and recognition from one's peers and other people, either sectarianly or in one's own group or something like that. But the ritual itself is only dependent on the two people involved raising up the Buddha mind together, recognizing each other. it's just as much the student recognizing the teacher as it is the teacher recognizing the student. I think oftentimes we think it's the teacher recognizing the student as a Dharma teacher or something like that. And, you know, in one sense that's true, but in a broader sense, it's really the two recognizing the awakened nature and raising that up together. And depending on where one goes, you know, that will be recognized one way or not. You know, some, as a Sotoshu priest, you know, I have taken the Bodhisattva precepts at Shiketokudo, at ordination. But if I were to go to Thailand, I would be just a devout layperson because I didn't take the Vinaya precepts, the monastic codes, you could say. And that's not a problem. That's not a problem because that's ritual enacted with one group and then ritual enacted with another group. And it's fine because each person has their own background and their own practice to do. And it's not to say one practice is better than another practice. And I think that's something that inherently happens with ritual, right? Something that's very meaningful for us, very enriching for us is something that we feel needs to be recognized by others. But maybe that's not the case. Maybe what's good for us is good for us. I think another part of ritual is understanding the forms of the ritual, because it's easy when we don't understand the forms of the ritual to put the ritual aside as something that is superfluous or excessive. So recently I had commented about some of Dogen Zenji's speech in Bendowa regarding Nembutsu practice, or Pure Land, reciting the Buddha's name. And Dogen had likened it to frogs croaking, that it's putting you further and further away from the Dharma. And I thought that that was kind of sad to put it that way. A practice that's not one's own practice is kind of considered to be frogs just croaking. But in another sense, I think Dogen is really trying to touch on something that is, when we don't understand the tradition of what we're practicing, this form, then we are far away from Dharma. It gets further and further away. So that means we do need to understand, you know, for example, understanding the ritual of Zazen, thinking that we sit Zazen to become a Buddha, that's never going to happen. You know, sitting down to become something isn't going to happen. But when we understand that sitting Zazen is being a Buddha, this is what a Buddha does. When we understand that sitting Zazen is resting and putting down the conditioned self of body, speech, and mind. The conditioned body becomes the body of Zazen. The conditioned karmic speech becomes no speech. And the conditioned mental formations that we have are let go of. So we're no longer lighting the fire of greed, hate, and ignorance through body, speech, and mind. We're putting them down. This is the exact practice of a Buddha. This is practice awakening together. Now, when we don't understand that, then sitting can just be lighting the fires of greed, hate, and ignorance. The greed of wanting something that we don't already have, which is our awakening. The ignorance that sitting here in this form is going to give us something. And the body is holding on to this form through all the pain and difficulties that we have, thinking that that somehow in and of itself alone is the thing. So I could say that, like Dogen said in Bendowa, if Nembutsu, without an understanding of it, is croaking like a frog, then sitting Zazen without an understanding of it is sitting like a frog on a wall. It's nothing. So it's easy to misunderstand. But when we understand the form, when we understand why we're doing it, what it's pointing to, what it means, why we embody it, then there's freedom in that, because we understand that we're sitting in our original nature. We're not trying to be anywhere else. When we recite Namu Amida Butsu, We are one with Amida Buddha. There's no self and other. The self is conditioned. There's just Amida Buddha and my own Buddha nature. So when we understand a ritual, we understand a practice, that in and of itself gives it the meaning. But if we think that we recite Namo Amida Butsu in order to be somewhere else, or we sit zazen in order to receive something we're not already, then those forms are empty and they don't mean anything. It's kind of like when Dogen said in Fukan Zazengi that you don't need to travel to other faraway places and you could just sit right here. The irony is Dogen had to travel all the way to China in order to realize that you don't need to go anywhere else, that you could just do it where you are. So it's part of the path. It's part of the process. The Buddha's failures before his awakening were the practice. We often think that failure has to be one side, awakening has to be the other side, but it's a very holistic thing. Every time we're doing it wrong is a part of doing it right. You know, they're not separate from each other. So to think that the Buddha failed and then awakened after years of practice underneath the Bodhi tree, no, that was all practice. And ritual is the same way. To think that the ritual will lead to something else, no, the ritual is the whole thing. The ritual is waking up in the morning, brushing your teeth, making a cup of coffee, going and getting the baby, changing the diaper, getting the cereal ready, lighting incense together, you know, off to daycare or preschool. Then you get maybe 15 minutes to sit zazen quietly before you're too tired as a parent. This is just my ritual. But the point is, ritual goes through the whole entire day. Life is a ritual. And life is not empty. So when people think oftentimes, and when I have thought oftentimes that, you know, oh, why do we do that? That seems this way. Or why do we do that? That seems that way. Or, oh, I really like when we do this. No, it's not empty. Our whole entire life is a ritual. Every single breakfast we make is a ritual. And that is why practice is carried into every single thing we do. There's a gatha for brushing your teeth. There's a gatha for going to the bathroom. There's a gatha for doing everything. And the reason why is because there is no gap. There's no separation. This ritual that we're doing, when done for awakening, when crushing the fang of delusion, when we're brushing our teeth, we're not just brushing our teeth. So everything becomes a ritual towards awakening. Look here. What are you missing? Look here.